Hello, I'm back today for another play with these R&F Drawing Oils. I unboxed these in my last video, and first of all I thought I'd do an update on their drying times. After my last video, I swatched out all 36 drawing oils that I've got onto this primed canvas board. I laid them down as thickly as I could, with a pretty equal amount in each box. I was hoping to get back to these a bit sooner, but things have been a bit busy. So this is now 5 days since I swatched this out. So I'm going to see how much they've dried. I'll do the white one by hand, but the others I'll use a paper towel with. So that feels drier than when I did it, but there's still a little bit of white coming off. Actually, I'll use my finger again on these light colours because it won't show up on a paper towel. Yeah, that feels more tacky than the white. There's a fair bit coming off on that. So the unbleached titanium feels a lot drier, and this was actually one of the ones that felt quite crusty when I was drawing with it. Like it had a thicker crust to it, so that would make sense. I wouldn't say it's completely dry. I think I'm going to rate these out of 5. So I'd say that that's 4 out of 5 dry, and 5 out of 5 means it feels completely dry. So that one I'll say is a 3 out of 5, and that one's a 2 out of 5. And that feels very dry. That's still very wet. A bit wetter than that one. That's still pretty wet, though it doesn't feel as wet as the Jaune Brilliant. So I ended up testing them all with my finger because I couldn't feel how dry they were enough with just using the tissue. Though I don't recommend doing that very often because of the toxic pigments in some of them. So this is not particularly scientific, but I did try and compare the same numbers and make sure there was some kind of consistency. And there was quite a bit of variation. So some felt like they were almost totally dry. I didn't award any a 5 because I still felt like even though they were dry to the touch, they could firm up a little bit more. So there's quite a few. Let's go through. The unbleached titanium, cadmium yellow, warm pink. These are all the ones that got 4 or 4.5 out of 5. So the most dry ones. Warm pink's there. Dianthus pink, 4 out of 5. Quin magenta light, 4 out of 5. Provence blue, 4 out of 5. Cerulean grey, 4.5 out of 5. Turkey umber, 4 out of 5. Olive yellow, 4.5 out of 5. Mars yellow, 4 out of 5. Brown pink, 4 out of 5. Raw umber, 4.5 out of 5. Payne's grey, 4.5 out of 5. Neutral grey, 4 out of 5. And then the ones which dried the least, I awarded none of them 0 because I think all of them felt like they dried a tiny bit at least. So the lowest scorers, the Jaune Brilliant, 1 out of 5. Cadmium orange, 1.5 out of 5. Egyptian violet, 1 out of 5. Midnight blue, 1.5 out of 5. Sap green and chromium oxide green, 1.5 out of 5. Permanent green, 1 out of 5. Mars red, 1.5 out of 5. Mars black, 1.5 out of 5. And then the others fall somewhere in between those two extremes. So yeah, after 5 days, some of them are pretty much dried out, but plenty of them aren't. That was quite thick though, so now I'll take a look at the picture which I did, where I blended out the drawing oils a fair bit more. So the sky, although that was made with white, cobalt blue and Provence blue, the white dried 3.5 out of 5, the cobalt blue dried 2 out of 5, the Provence blue dried 4 out of 5. So on average, the sky colours were half dry on my thicker test. But I'd say the sky here, there's a slight tackiness to it, but none's coming away on my fingers. Yeah, so it's touch dry, but not fully dry. There's still a tackiness to it. Now the white here, this was a layer of titanium zinc white drawing oil. Then I'd actually put some oil pastel on top. And then on top of that, I'd put some Winsor & Newton water mixable oil paint. So the white you can see here is all oil paint. And actually that is all dry now. It's maybe got a slight tackiness to it, but it's touch dry and none's coming off on my finger. So that worked quite well, and that's actually sealed in the oil pastel layer that's in there. The sea colours are all touch dry. And then these greens, well, they feel dry. There's a bit more tackiness to this one. So the chromium oxide green was one of the lesser drying ones. That's probably why that's still a bit tacky. And then the sand colours here, that mainly feels dry. It's got a bit of tackiness to it. There's a little bit come off, but this was actually, these beige blobs were oil pastel, so that doesn't dry out anyway. And then we've got these greens. I would expect these to be most wet because these greens didn't dry very well. So actually they're not too bad. They still feel tacky, but there's a little bit's coming off. This purple's coming off, and that's the Egyptian violet, which I had down for drying 1 out of 5. And it was laid down quite thickly in the shadow areas. And then over here, yeah, this was the Mars Red. There's a little bit coming off there, but that was 1.5 out of 5 drying, and that was a fairly thick layer. And this other dark here was the Cherry Absinthe, kind of like a dark greeny brown colour. And it's a little bit tacky. It's laid down quite thickly. A tiny bit coming off. So overall, not bad. I'd say touch dry after 5 days with the odd damper areas. I hope that gives you some idea of the process of them drying anyway. So this was all the colours, but I'd blended them out. So let's just look at some of the least drying colours. That was the Jaune Brilliant. And that's, yeah, it's dry to touch, a little bit tacky, picking up some of the pigment that was on my fingers from other colours. The Egyptian Violet, yeah, that's still wet. Down this pink dry. Midnight Blue was one of the wetter ones. Yeah, that's still a bit wet. These greens and turquoises were midway. They were 2.5 out of 5 and 3.5 out of 5. And they're a little bit kind of squeaky, but none's coming off. A tiny bit coming off the chromium oxide. That was one of the wetter ones. The sap green's not dried too badly. That was fine. Yeah, the Mars Red, a little bit's coming off still. They feel all right. Mars Black's quite tacky. So yeah, when you blend them out, most of them have dried a decent amount to be touch dry. I'm going to leave having more of a play with these for another video. A few people had been asking how they dried, so I'll get this video uploaded now. I hope it was helpful anyway. Thanks ever so much. Bye!